And welcome back to the Morning Brew. As always, hope you're having a great morning. Special in-studio guest today, Dale Jackson. How are you doing, Dale?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me on, Kevin.
Well, great to have you here. Dale has been a trailblazer in the state of Georgia, and as I was telling Dale, he really exemplifies the essence of parenthood, fatherhood, and going above and beyond for his son. We'll just start off. Tell us about your son. Tell us your son's name and how old he is and what's kind of like going on with him.
Okay. My son is Colin Jackson.
Okay.
He's 8 years old, severely autistic. What that means for him and his form of autism is that he would be considered very low functioning.
Okay.
He didn't start to walk until he was around 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
Which is obviously a struggle. When he was an infant, he was having what they call generalized seizures, where basically when he was born, he was having a constant seizure up until the time he was roughly about 18 months old. And of course, obviously, my wife Sarah and I, noticed his delayed development, and that's when we got him checked out, and he is still non-verbal, so he's never really spoken any words. He is just now beginning to learn how to communicate with us in his own way.
Wow.
So
at 8.
At 8.
Dale, I can't fathom what the struggles have been like for you and your family. How have you dealt with this? And we'll get along to what the essence of why you're really here. But how did you guys deal with that in the beginning?
Well, not easily. There's no way you can't sugarcoat. As parents, we always have dreams and aspirations for our children. And then when you replace those dreams and aspirations with the reality that more than likely I will be caring for my son until the day I die. And then as a parent, you deal with the question of, well, then what?
Wow.
What, normally at that time in a person's life, their children are coming back to help them, that last stage of life.
Right.
And my concern is, well, what about my son who's still alive, that's still going to need, 24-hour care? So how do we deal with that? Our church.
Okay.
The community at large. We have been amazed at the reaction that we have seen, the people that Colin, that his life has touched them. Our church, as I was mentioning earlier, we started a special needs school here in Troup County, the Discovery Cottage, at Lafayette Christian School. My church, Sovereign Grace Church, just so happens that our minister, his wife, has a 30-year-old autistic brother.
Wow.
Who's severely affected as well. And so she obviously has a passion. And so we started a special needs program at Sovereign Grace Church specifically for parents of special needs children, but also the children themselves. So.
Okay. So you are, can you call it a fight? Well, I know you're in a fight, but can you call it, you have been trying to allow for your son to have, I always say it wrong, what is the oil?
Cannabis oil.
Cannabis oil, okay, cannabis oil. So you've been fighting, how long have you been in a fight with the state of Georgia? Go ahead.
Yeah, great question. And there's a story in and of itself. It's just how I became involved, and I've told it quite frequently. But it all started with my best friend and his family. He had I think at that time, a 18-year-old daughter that was literally scheduled for brain surgery because of her seizures. She had,
Wow.
she was having seizures that were unable to be controlled with, modern medicine. And their answer was that they were going to literally remove part of her brain. And she was going to have to learn to talk again, to, communicate, to walk again. And because of, I've been heavily involved in politics at the state capitol for the last 5 years. I knew about this movement. I'd heard about this movement of trying to legalize cannabis oil. And at that time, that was back in 2014, it was strictly for treating seizures.
Okay.
And so I just happened to mention it to him just to look into it. I had no idea if it would help her or not. And I believe within 3 or 4 weeks of me mentioning that to him, his family was living in Colorado and she was experiencing her first week of being seizure free.
Wow.
And then so the deeper I got into that, just in essence helping him, trying to gain access here in Georgia, I began to learn more and more about the potential benefits from people dealing with MS, ALS, cancer, Parkinson's. Just yesterday I got a message from a lady that used it to treat her extreme bipolar disorder, which normally puts her into the hospital for weeks under psychiatric care. She used cannabis oil for 1 day and woke up the next day feeling great, and completely, her body had kind of went through what it normally takes weeks to do. She did it in a matter of 24 hours. Obviously for me, my passion is autism. And that is obviously something I'm passionate about, but there's a specific reason, and this is another battle with perception that I face every single day.
I can only imagine.
Not only with me personally and our issues with autism, but society as a whole likes, I feel like that we like to think of autistic children as Rain Man.
I got you.
And that helps us sleep at night, I think. Or we think of the video on YouTube or Facebook of the young autistic child that is a piano prodigy. That's what we like to think of autism. The sad truth is that most autistic children, it's not pretty. It's not Rain Man. It's not the piano prodigy. It's the 4-year-old girl that her parents were having to strap her to a bed for up to 8 hours a day because she was literally biting her arm, and like, there's no pretty way to say that. I mean, it was ugly. It's the single mother who wakes up every single day to her 14-year-old son, and she's afraid of him, because when you're autistic and you hear these noises in your head, you feel things that you and I don't hear or can't feel, and on top of that, you can't communicate that. You can't tell your mom what you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you're hearing. And the only way they know to silence those feelings or those sounds is with just rage. They overcome those sounds with their own sounds of rage, and a lot of times it turns into literally running into a wall, beating their head against a wall. I know those parents. I hear those stories. I see those stories. And thankfully, after they contact us, I also get to hear those stories of that same single mother who just yesterday told me that she was able to take her son to the grocery store. I don't think parents can, unless you're there, unless you walk through that yourself, you cannot understand the joy.
Wow.
And just taking your child in public and not being scared to death of what's going to happen next. What is going to be that sound or that noise that triggers their next outburst, or triggers them to just run, to run away from whatever they're hearing, whatever they're seeing, and that oftentimes turns into running into traffic. An autistic child doesn't comprehend danger. And to be able to help those families is definitely something that makes it all worthwhile.
With that being said, and I'm sure there are a lot of cases across the state of Georgia, why is it difficult to have this all legalized so people such as your family and other people that you're talking about have easy access to this? Why has it been such a struggle to legalize cannabis oil in the state of Georgia?
Well, we're fighting, roughly 50 years of bad information. It generally, it doesn't take long to convince somebody of the medical benefits, but everybody's not willing to hear what we have to say. There's a lot of people at the state capitol that there's no pretty way to say it. They benefit from big pharma's answer to all of the issues that we feel like it's a possible solution with cannabis oil. There's a lot of money involved in it, just as far as law enforcement. A very frustrating part is that through all of our battles at the state capitol, no one would argue against our bills. They, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be the Attorney General's council, or even the far right Christian coalition, so to speak, they could not point to anything in our legislation and say this is wrong or this is dangerous. Their only argument was, if we pass this, then we're one step closer to becoming Colorado, which has full recreational legalization, which is not what we're advocating for. It's not what we're asking for. So in essence, it all boils down to denying our children medical care just because of something that may happen 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And as a father, that's pretty tough to deal with.
Wow. When people look at you, I know you're all over the place. You've been on television. What do you get backlash for you being in this fight and fighting for your child? Do people look at you differently, or do they say? I can only imagine that people seeing you, and it's kind of like you're fighting the state of Georgia. You're fighting the laws. So do people? You getting backlash from that?
I will say this. I have been involved politically. I'm an executive member of the Georgia Republican Party, which is quite ironic that this is my issue. But I mean, ultimately, I believe that the Republican Party stands for supposedly limited government. The number one complaint we had with Obamacare is that we feel like it's the government getting in between the doctor and the patient. I feel like that this issue is the exact same thing.
Okay.
But politically, do I feel the backlash? Absolutely. We were just successful in passing our resolution at the Georgia State Convention in support of cannabis oil. Overwhelmingly, the body of the convention voted in favor of our resolution. But prior to that, I'm a district chairman. All district chairmen get to name committee appointments to represent their district. All of my recommendations, including myself, was completely ignored by the state party. So, do I feel backlash? Yeah. On a personal side, those things, I draw the line at how open I am.
Okay.
So, I won't go there.
Okay, that's good.
But, yeah, it's an issue.
Yes, okay. So your son had the opportunity to try some cannabis oil. Did it help him?
Did it help him? Did it cure him? No. My son still has autism. But is it helping him with with his brain development, absolutely. Some of the other children I described earlier, they have extreme behaviors. Thankfully, my son does not. One day, he may wake up and have those. So we have different oils that we're helping those parents find access to. For my son, the oil that we worked with another group out of state to develop is called Colin's Voice. And it is specifically designed for autistic children that don't have those extreme rages and self-injurious behaviors. But for Colin and for children like him, his oil has a higher level of CBD. And CBD has been proven to be very beneficial for cognitive development. So, a very long answer to your question, did it help him? Absolutely. Right after we started treating him with cannabis oil, he began to understand things. Even though he didn't have those extreme rages, he would still get very frustrated. He couldn't understand when I would have to take him away from his favorite thing of say being outdoors, and because he's 8 years old and I have to change his diaper. He didn't understand that, well, we need to go inside and change your diaper, and then I'm going to let you come right back out here. And so he would get very upset. But we now it seems like that I can tell him that. Even though he can't communicate back to me, I feel like he is communicating back because he's not getting so upset when I have to just bring him inside, change his diaper, and let him go back out. Simple things that I'm sure many parents take for granted is the ability to, tell your child it's time to eat supper. And now I can tell him that, and he will get up and walk to the table and go stand at his chair. And so there's that level of communication. It's not verbal. It's certainly not perfect, but as a parent who's never had any level of communication, that's something that is amazing, and I will do anything in my power to make sure that he always has that medicine.
And now, 2015, what type of law was passed for legalizing cannabis oil in the state of Georgia? What did that law? What was that law about?
That's a great question, Kevin, because I'm pretty sure half of the legislature and most of law enforcement don't understand the law either. The reality is the state of Georgia passed a law that allows parents for certain conditions to treat their children with cannabis oil. So logic would say, well, cannabis oil is legal in the state of Georgia. Well, no, it's not. If you have a certain condition, then you can apply for a government card that gives you the legal right to treat your child. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you any legal way to actually purchase the oil. And a very important message that I want the viewers to understand is that there is nowhere in the whole United States that I, as a parent, a resident of Georgia, can go and purchase cannabis oil legally. There are states where I can go and purchase a bag of weed if I did want to get high, which I don't. And I also don't want my child getting high either. So I can purchase weed, but in every single state that has laws that allow this, you have to be a resident of that state to purchase for medical reasons, because obviously it's more important, and they want to be more careful about this product and how we're treating children. So a few things to note and a few difficulties is that unless we grow it here in the state of Georgia, there's no way for a resident of Georgia to legally purchase it. Now, and before we have to leave, I want to make this other very important part, is finding somebody here in Georgia with, for a lack of a better term, with weed. You can take that marijuana and you can process it down to oil. The problem with that also is that you have no idea what that is. If you want to smoke weed, then if there are any impurities in that, the actual smoking process burns those off.
Right, right.
But if you take that same marijuana or cannabis and you process it down to oil, now you have condensed all of those contaminants, potential contaminants, and you're not burning it, you're ingesting it. And so that's bad. That's actually dangerous for our children, that our government here in Georgia has, that is their answer. So what we have done is we've set up a network of families that are very informed on this. We've went out of the state and actually worked with other people out of the state to develop specific strains to deal with cancer, ALS, Parkinson's, all those things I mentioned earlier, autism. And we're helping those families find access to that oil. And then here's the most important part, because parents don't, they barely understand, you know, what they're getting into. They certainly don't understand all of the finer details of dosing.
Right.
Well, you know, when you go to the doctor and he gives you a prescription for medication, he's going to tell you, or his nurses are going to walk you through that process.
Right.
And then if you have a question about it, then you can call your local pharmacist, who's going to actually give you that medication, and ask them questions. Who do you ask if you just buy it off the street, or you find some guy that's willing to ship it to you in another state, and you know, and he doesn't, if he's doing it on the black market, he can't get it lab tested. So it's very critical that parents have that network, to ask questions, and it all must be lab tested. It needs to be lab tested because we want it to be effective.
Right.
And it's not, there's just wide range. Everybody calls it cannabis oil, but it's very specific strains, it's very specific ratios, and the difference between CBD and CBN and THC and THCA, and you have to know
that.
What is in this oil, just to know if it's what you need. And unfortunately, I hear stories every single day that someone, you know, just found oil and they bought it, and now they want to know, well, is this what my child needs? Well, I don't know. What are the labs on it? Because you have to have it lab tested. What's the potency of it? How strong is it? That's going to change your dosing on that level. And so that's the reason why just finding it, just having access to it, is not the end all be all.
Right.
It's having that network of people that can help you walk through that process. That's what's important. And it's most important to make it effective. The last thing we want are parents that they do their research, they say, okay, I feel like this is going to be good for my child, and then they just go and find it anywhere they can find it.
Right.
And because it wasn't specifically what their child needed, it didn't work. And so now they just throw their hands up and say, oh, I knew it wasn't, you know, it was all a fluke, it was a scam.
Okay.
You know, instead, it could have worked if they had a proper way to access it with support. So that's one thing that I mean, it's a necessity, is having that network of families to make sure that it's effective.
Wow. Okay. Well, Dale Jackson, appreciate you coming and sharing your story here on WJCN. Very powerful. Count your blessings, folks, because you just never know what people are having to go through. And I wish you much success in all of your efforts to not only help your family, but help other families. And so I just applaud you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Okay.